great. That's a thumb. Okay, great. Hi. Hello. My name is Terri Paddock. I am delighted to be here tonight on behalf of Original Theatre, chairing this post-show discussion after the on-demand premiere of Marcus Brigstocke's The Red. I'm joined in this discussion by Bruce and Sam Alexander, who played the father and son in the play and play a father and son in real life, which is very handy. As well as Charlotte Peters, who directed the film production, and Max Pappenheim, who is the sound designer and composer. So thank you all for joining me. Now, I just wanted to say, Charlotte and I know each other, and she reminded me before we watched this evening that the last time we were physically in a room together was 2 years ago to the day when I chaired a post-show discussion for what was one of the last live theatre productions in London, last live theatre performances in London before you know what. And Charlotte was in the audience and we got very emotional. So I feel emotional in a completely different way tonight. And it seems so appropriate as well that this is not just about coming back, but that we've watched something that seems to so typify how theatre has responded with innovation and vigor to this unprecedented crisis that we've all gone through. So yay, Original Theatre, yay, all of you. And thank you for reminding me, Charlotte. Now, we have very limited time and I already have lots of questions, but if I can just recap for those who might not know, this play has had an extraordinary journey to date. So it was, and correct me everybody if I get anything wrong, okay? But it was originally commissioned, Marcus Brigstocke, who many of us will know already from his other work, was commissioned to write it as a radio play. It won awards as a radio play. He then adapted it for the stage, which he directed. Were you guys in the radio version as well?
Not in the radio.
So you did it on the stage at the Omnibus Theatre in London, and then you took it to Edinburgh Fringe with great success. And then Original picked it up during COVID, and Charlotte then directed this version of it. And Max, did you work on the stage production as well? No. So you guys have been brought in for this iteration. Marcus Brigstocke wrote the play. It's a very personal play based on his own recovery and family relationships. So there's a lot of history. Have I encapsulated it? Okay.
Yes,
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So then let me start first with Bruce and Sam. I also have a whole list of questions that have already been sent through to me. So I'm going to kind of mix some of my own thoughts with questions that have come through via social media. But a real attraction to me and to the people watching is that these characters are being played by you as real father and son. So if I don't credit everybody, I'm sorry. But tell us, what is it like working together? Have you worked together before as father and son? And why did it appeal to do it in this instance?
We have indeed, yes. We did something on the telly in which we played father and son. And a radio play, yes. And but the thing on the telly as father and son, he was my illegitimate son. That particular story.
I don't think that's the case in real life. My mother is in the audience. We can talk about that.
No, but that was quite different. And in a way, I think we found that rather difficult. At least I did, because to look at this man in the face and take him seriously is quite difficult.
Yeah.
But this, no, I tell you what appealed to me. I got sent the script and by Marcus, I think so, and I just thought it's such an extraordinary play, isn't it? Because it goes into areas that I think. Well, it's sort of inside his head, isn't it? Really, and it goes into that on a very important subject, and it's so personal to Marcus, and it's driven by his desire to get this subject discussed. And so it was irresistible to me. And then I heard he was doing it too. Well, all right, perhaps I will.
Actually, I went to university with Marcus. So
Okay.
I think you'll find I got in there first.
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll talk about that later. No, but actually, the funny thing is, everyone asks, and it is very special to work with Dad and with. But the funny thing is, I would say it's not any different, really, from working with a really, really close friend, which a lot of us are lucky enough to do. Well, once or twice or 3 times or whatever. Because when you first work, normally you have to get to know someone, and that's part of the delicate process of rehearsals, as well as working on the script, is to actually also forge, you hope, a friendship.
Yeah.
But if you can cut all that out and you know each other inside out, and back to front.
Yeah.
It's really, you have a lovely shorthand, and everything's just.
I've bathed
rosy.
this boy.
And maybe I'll bathe this man one day. Who knows? Who knows?
You're
Swings
booked.
and roundabouts. Swings and roundabouts. Very quickly, can you remember when you did it in front of live audiences? What were the highlights for you from the London and Edinburgh runs and working with Marcus?
Well, it's such a powerful. I suppose, really, like you dream of and doing a lot of plays, it's just the response of the audiences, because we met people to whom it meant so much, because they'd been through something similar or a journey, and that's the beauty of the play, or the strength of the play, that it's so honest and truthful about a dilemma and doesn't come up with answers. We know life's a process, and this is a particular process that someone's been through, and I think to actually sort of share that with people who've been quite seriously involved in alcohol, say, it was wonderful.
It's the authenticity, because it is so true to Marcus's own experience. And you met people. We met people in the street in Edinburgh who just, were absolutely. They would show us their little. They have some people have a coin that says, I've been sober for 10 years or 20 years, or I remember one guy just showing me his coin, and he'd seen the play, and you knew that if you tried to tell this story from an unauthentic point of view, even if you did really good research, I think it would be quite hard. But from Marcus is a man who knows it inside out.
He knows it inside out, indeed. So, Charlotte, you then came on board, as I said, for this iteration. Where did the idea come from to film it in this way?
Oh, that's a good question. I think that it's a combination of things. Obviously, we've had a 2 years full of a slightly fraught COVID situation, which has brought about something as kind of brilliant as this hybrid, but also meant that we went from what was originally intended to be in a kind of big grand theatre in Ipswich to the Vaults, which is more of a fringe space because of a COVID delay that we had. And so we suddenly found ourselves in a cellar. And it made a lot more sense to push towards the more cinematic filmic elements of that, because that's the setting we were in. And certainly, personally, as soon as I got in that room and I saw kind of these chairs laid out, I thought, well, that's where AA could be, because actually with the lights, very firmly on and no stage presence at all, you do get the sense that, these Alcoholics Anonymous meetings take place in town halls. They take place really in village halls where often there is a stage or there's some auditorium seating. And so it was really interesting how just in the 3 days really we were there, more and more lent itself to the process of making this film, and we really pushed it towards I suppose a more filmic way than sometimes some stream productions are.
Yes. This is also one for you, but others can chip in, from James on Facebook. How important was it for a female director to lead a male cast, and talking about themes of fatherhood, fathers and sons?
Oh, that's a good question. I think that having a different perspective is always very useful in a room, whatever gender that person may be. I think that whatever our lived experience, we bring something else to a process. It was interesting how much in rehearsals we did talk about my family, actually. And so I think there's something about the process of rehearsals when you kind of open up and you talk and you share. And, as I say, whatever gender you are, whoever you are, there is something extra that's brought to that. And I suppose perhaps as a woman, you look at things from a different perspective. You're looking at it from a perspective of seeing two male characters in this case. And maybe that does mean that I am looking at it slightly differently. I'm looking through a different lens. I don't know. It's difficult to say without the lived experience that these gents
of course, we've had two directors on this.
Yeah.
Marcus did join in as well on the
very much
this version. But if anything, I suppose we were so pleased to be working together up in Edinburgh. It was quite cosy, It had that sort of element. So I think something that sort of Charlotte brought out was a bit more. If I say edginess, you hardly saw any of it on the screen, perhaps, but there is just a bit more a generation gap or something.
Yes. And I will just say, again, short on time, so we won't go into detail, but you had the extra challenges of COVID disrupting your rehearsal process and all sorts of Zoom rehearsals again that many theatre productions have had to deal with over the past 2 years. Max, let me bring you into this. The sound and the music. are so beautifully used to create the atmosphere and to cover up the sound of trains occasionally.
or exploit the sound of trains.
Or exploit, because the vaults, for those who don't know, is beneath Waterloo Station. So tell me, yes, how did you approach this? Is it a different approach that you've taken here than you might do for a live stage production?
Very much so, because in a live production, obviously we come into rehearsals and ideas take shape as we watch all of that, and then we have this wonderful rehearsal and preview periods on stage when we put everything together. But with the film is made at the stage where the music gets worked in. So I have the pleasure of watching and listening to the performance in minute detail, and it is the same performance each time on film. So there's the ability to really wind individual notes of music into exact gaps between words and so forth, without it trying to avoid it become too mannered. So there's a very fine sort of crafting that can take place.
So did you create it before the performance or in the editing? Did much of the work come actually after they filmed it?
Charlotte and I shared a few thoughts and references and ideas, but it felt like the film was very much taking shape, and the tone of the film was very much taking shape in the edit of the performances and the dialogue. So that really it was in the space of about a week that the finished film arrived, the finished edit arrived, and then the music took shape watching those performances and reading every nuance.
I'm constantly amazed by how much theatre people can accomplish in the shortest periods of time. But so, just to put us in awe again, Charlotte, recap. How long did you have from beginning to end? How long did you have for each thing?
Well, we rehearsed. The aim was to rehearse. We had 2 wonderful days with Marcus, which were really, really wonderful for me, because it was very important that I wanted to convey the essence of what Marcus wanted the production to be. So we had 2 days that went off swimmingly, didn't they? And then the following week we were supposed to have, I think, 4 days. But sadly, on day 2, Bruce got that double line that we all dread. And so what we ended up doing was kind of spending 2.5 days around a kind of Zoom computer with Bruce, with Sam and I in a room. And then we came together, and I think it was we had a couple of hours really to chat about it, or a few hours to chat about it together in a room, and then we just shot it.
Was it one
and then
take shot?
We had about 2.5 days, and in that 2.5 days we ran it twice, and then there were a few moments that we wanted to focus on, like for instance reversing the room the other way to look at the audience. But yeah, we ran it twice in those 2 days, changing camera setups as we went along, and just did that in 2.5 days. And then the following week, I think Tristan spent about 4 or 5 days editing it, and then Max, you spent about 4 or 5 days composing and doing the sound. So all in all, from beginning to end, the process was about 3.5 weeks.
That's unbelievable.
On the top of a 2019
that is very
run in
very
Edinburgh.
fair to say. Yeah,
So
absolutely.
there's that
Yes.
as well. But,
Yeah, the
it's quite
rapport
a long time.
came already. I was
The
very
muscle
glad.
memory was still
Yeah,
there.
and
Very
the
much
44 years of
father-son. Did you, and so back to you two, how does it feel to have gone on this journey with this piece, and now to know that, unlike so much of theatre, which is so ephemeral, that you've got this here for posterity?
I know. I was tremendously anxious about seeing it, actually, because we do deal in ephemera, that easy come, easy go, and it's gone. And it's rather extraordinary to think that we'll be watching this every Christmas Eve with those paper hats on.
How did you feel watching yourselves on the big screen, the two of you together?
Yeah, I was quite nervous about that, but actually it looked classy. And I don't mean necessarily the acting, but so I was quite, within a few minutes I thought, we're in very safe hands, with how it's been made, and yeah.
It looks very classy. Okay, shall I take an audience question from an actual live audience? Live audience, do you have any questions, or are we ruling the roost here? So shy. That's why I don't trust audiences. Okay, it's okay. I have other questions. Was there anything, Bruce and Sam, that you enjoyed more? Elizabeth on Facebook is asking about performing on film rather than on stage, or vice versa.
Yes, I mean this is quite an intimate play. It's really good. It lends itself, I would think, really well to, because it's so intimate. It's two people talking, or maybe really only one person talking, in a way, in a small space. And when we did it in Edinburgh, for example, our venue at the Pleasance was quite long and thin, and you were really aware that you needed to, as always, make sure that someone sitting on the back row was getting their money's worth. So it was lovely not to have to do that, and to know that the camera was coming into us, and it felt like of all the scripts, it felt like a script that really needed that.
And it's quite bold writing, really,
Yeah.
because actually, when you think of it, I'm not just talking about the subject matter, but there are different styles going on, which actually Max got the hang of that because he helped that with the music. But in a way, when you're working in front of an audience, a live audience, whatever you provide, you do it with enough sort of confidence and chutzpah, they'll slot in. But I think it was filming it was rather odd, sort of thinking you've got these different styles, to see how that was actually going to play together, and I think it did beautifully, at least.
And for all of you, Carrie on Twitter wants to know, what has working on this piece taught you about addiction and the troubles that addicts can face, addicts and their families, I
Wow.
suppose?
Well, it is, of course, a subject a lot of us just deny, or pretend, because before I got involved in this play, I had the stereotypical view of a drunk, someone in a gutter, not able to control his movements, and possibly being rather ill. And this takes you into the sort of inside someone's head, the extraordinary thing is, it's taught me actually that it is a daily struggle, a daily tussle, a daily sense perhaps of joy and triumph as well as disaster, but it's a daily thing, and I think it's a wonderful lesson about how we actually do live our lives.
Marcus, I was lucky enough to go to an AA meeting, an open AA meeting, because there's closed meetings and open meetings with Marcus, and I could not believe the transformative effect of the meeting. There was only about 30 people there, and it seemed fairly downbeat. And in the course of the hour-long meeting, I swear to God, something magical happened. The laughter in the room and the energy and the positivity that were by the end of the hour. It was, I honestly felt slightly envious that I was missing out, and I suppose that for some people would be called the higher power thing. But so I learned a huge amount from going to that meeting with Marcus and talking to him just about the power of the collective to do something extraordinary, which I think is what AA is.
Yes.
It's not something that people do on their own, and maybe Benedict is lost his way a bit, as is mentioned 2 or 3 times. He isn't going to the meetings anymore, maybe because he feels like he doesn't have to, because it's been such a long time, etc., etc. But he wouldn't be in that pickle if he'd gone to the meetings, I suspect, and that's what he picks up on.
Max, Charlotte, anything you want to add to that?
I think the power of communication and the language, the having the courage to talk honestly about these things, and the way that humour can play a part, but also honesty and backing off from the humour when things get serious, because it's so easy to make a joke and move away from something that's difficult to talk about. I think the play moves nicely between those different modes, depending on how serious the point at hand really is.
Yeah, that's right. And it's amazing how Marcus normalises something that we're often quite scared to approach, in terms of hearing that somebody may have in the past. We never know, is somebody an alcoholic? I think what the play does so brilliantly is it shows us people in society who we know and love, who might be in our communities and in our circles, and what they are kind of battling with on a daily basis, and overcoming so brilliantly. And I think the nuances that Marcus creates with this do provide detail that we perhaps don't see in a lot of other depictions of addiction or alcoholism.
It's wonderful. There is no such thing as cure. There's just managing, isn't there, or dealing with, or accepting, or something.
Yeah.
So it's an ongoing. I think that's the lesson.
Benedict says at one point, it's a day at a time. Every
You
time.
don't ever promise in AA that people don't promise never to drink again, because they've tried that and that hasn't worked. They just say, I'm not going to drink today, and I'll take tomorrow and see how it goes.
We have so many more questions, but we've run out of time. So apologies to the many others that sent ones in. But I'm going to just say a quick one that I'm going to leave with Benedict, because it's also a suggestion that you need to pass on to your mate Marcus. Katie on Twitter says she would love to see a second chapter of Benedict's story. But Sam, what do you think is next for Benedict?
Well, it's very interesting. Lots of people after the show would come up to me and I'd realise that it was a completely different point of view as to whether he or not at the end. Cheers means, and now I'm going to have a drink, or cheers, I've worked out what the problem is, I'll just put that down. And I do have a view on that, but it's sort of irrelevant because the play stops with that word. But yeah.
I thought it was very, very ambiguous too.
Yeah.
Very ambiguous.
Some people come out absolutely convinced that means he's about to down it,
Yeah.
and some people absolutely convinced the
Yeah.
other way. So
It's
Well,
worth mentioning actually regarding that moment that at the 11th hour and the 58th minute, ordinarily after the picture lock, the edit of the film would not change, and that would be that, not least for the sake of music and so forth. But at the 11th hour, in came the "please can we linger on that for one more second?"
Yeah.
Anyway, hair was torn out in every direction, but it was well worth, I think, making that little change to dwell on that.
Luckily, I had a very, very open and lovely editing team who were happy to accommodate that request.
Wonderful. Well, it's a wonderful piece of work. Thank you all, and thank you to Marcus. Charlotte, just remind us how long do people have to watch it online?
Oh my goodness. How long do people have to
22nd
watch
of
it
June,
online?
right? 22nd of June? Somebody tell me 22nd of June.
Yeah.
Yes,
22nd
it's
of June.
available now. Go over to Original Theatre's website. It's there along with a lot of other brilliant productions that Original Theatre have made. And yeah, we really hope you enjoy it, and we'd love to hear what you think on Facebook.
Okay, and live audience, now please join me in thanking Max and Charlotte and Sam and Bruce and Original Theatre.